Everybody, welcome back to Video Mess Out Here, and our continuing series, The History of the Dead, where I take a look at every single House of the Dead game made by Sega in a historic and retrospective fashion. And of course, if you can count, we've already done one. That means we're on to the House of the Dead 2. And this is an absolutely incredible game, and a lot of the events that happen in this game are going to play big factors in successive House of the Dead entries moving forward. So definitely pay attention to the lore and the characters we're seeing here, like James, because James is going to play a very outsized role in a lot of the games coming up along with his brother. Before I get too far involved though, you need to be a huge favor, down below hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But I remember the day this came out in arcades, and I absolutely fell in love with it, and I pre-ordered a Japanese Dreamcast with a Japanese copy of The House of the Dead 2, so I could play it before it came to North America. That's how excited I was about this game. I probably played this game 50, 60, 70 times at this point in time, and it never gets old. But without much further ado, let's get right into the game and start talking about the story and what's going on. And right off the top, we have to go meet G, the lead character from the original House of the Dead. If you watched that video last week, you'll know what we're talking about. If you don't, you probably should go watch that one after this is over. But I do love the intro, and I do love these old British-style sports cars, because this is taking place in Italy, if you can't tell already by the architecture. But I just love the zombie designs of this game as well. They are way more graphically detailed than the original game, and all of the gore and destructive limb violence is here 100%. But as we come inside, I just can't get over these environments. When this first came out, it looked absolutely spectacular. I still think it looks great to this day. I love that little zombie hiding behind the chair there and on the floor. There's a ton of jump scares in this game. I know where they all are now. When I first played it, it really did catch me off guard sometimes. But we did find G, and he has been injured, and he said that he tried. G is not the main character of this game. We're moving it over to James Taylor, and that is a fun time just to kind of mix it up a little bit. But if you don't remember G, like I said, he got his start right here in the House of the Dead, also driving a small British-style sports car. That is a theme throughout the entire House of the Dead. Someone on the dev team or graphics team must have just loved those type of cars, because they take place in pretty much every single House of the Dead game I have ever played. There is some sort of sports car rocking around. But we get zombie frogs, and you can never complain about that. They are always a good time. But again, it's just the entire universe that this game inhabits. I absolutely love it. And so much of the story goes forward. If we jump ahead in the series to House of the Dead 4, James is still around. He is still a playable character, and his story, probably more so than any other character, kind of impacts the overall hierarchy of how the House of the Dead 2 and the entire series in general works. This is a foundational game. The first game starts everything off, but House of the Dead 2 provides us with a lot of the lore that we're going to be talking about in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th entries in this series. But I just love that big bulging eyeball that sometimes just pops out of the head when you shoot a headshot, and it's kind of just skittering around in the socket there. There is just such a ton of detail in this game that it's oozing in every single square inch with something new to look at. But of course, because there's something attacking you pretty much every single time you are trying to look at something, you don't get as much of a chance to admire the detail as you normally would like to get. Moving on to the first boss, Judgment here, another great enemy design. I love that he has no head, and his actual weak point is his companion flying around him. It takes a little bit to get used to hitting him. I always struggle with this boss, but once you get the hang of it and his patterns, it becomes pretty easy to hit what you need to. And that's the thing about this type of game. Once you play it more than once and you play it often, getting better at it is so simple. All of the patterns are generally the same. It's just down to complete muscle memory. And outside of a historical standpoint, talking about the game as a review, it is just a 10 out of 10 perfect game in my opinion. I can never get enough of this title. What I keep coming back to foundationally is just the fact that this is such an important story within the overall canon of the House of the Dead. If you play one game first, I actually might recommend it to be this one, because it's going to set you up for everything moving forward. Maybe play 2, and then 1, and then 4, and then Scarlet Dawn, and then possibly 3. I'm still kind of working out the overall structure in my own head, but if you have an idea, leave me a comment down below. But this is Goldman. Curian is dead, Goldman is alive, and Goldman's also dead. And that's not going to make as much sense to you right now, but once you get to the House of the Dead 4 video, you will 100% understand how Goldman's narrative drives us through a lot of this series as well. I don't want to spoil too many things. It is a history retrospective, but it's going to be laid out in different pieces, so once you watch the entire storyline, storyline unfold throughout the series, you will get more of what I mean. But just again, this car driving up, if you rescue him, you get one path. If you let him die, you get another. And this game probably has the best branching paths of any House of the Dead, in my opinion, even more so than the Curian Mansion in the original game. It is just so much to see, so much to do, and a lot of the branching paths you don't even realize are branching until you either do something correctly or fail at doing it. It's not always signposting where you're going. But one of my favorite parts of this game is the soundtrack. It's a 10 out of 10, so go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. Just so damn good. And interestingly, killing children in video games or watching them die is not a thing that happens very often, but the House of the Dead 2 can actually be quite grim, because you just saw a child lose his life and a woman be thrown into a window. You now have the possibility to rescue two different characters, this older woman and this young child here. And if you do both of those things, they're going to walk up and say, "Mom." That is their mother, and she has died. That is grim for any sort of video game, especially one for Sega in the arcades. And like I said, you don't see children die very often in video games, but the House of the Dead 2 did incorporate that. And I wanted to talk about it just from a very different perspective of something you don't normally see. I will say, though, this game can be quite difficult at times. I'm probably the worst at the House of the Dead 2 of any game in the franchise, even though I've played it the most. And I think it's just the fact that this game was definitely, in my opinion, more difficult than the original. But leave me a comment down below and tell me how you think the difficulty is, because I am always curious to hear what you guys think versus what I think. Sometimes we completely agree and sometimes we differ a lot, but it's always fun to have that conversation. But again, just look at this room, the light coming in, the light from the gunshots slightly flashing against the wall. It is just such an interesting environment. It's so grungy and so old, that European aesthetic of an old city. It just 100% works for what it's trying to do. And that's what I keep coming back to when I play a game like this. Every single component is adding something to the equation. Every single art set piece, every single character, outside of their dialogue, it's never good, but that's kind of part and parcel for the series. Every single model and background just go to create a convincing environment where you really do think something like this could happen. Someone like Goldman could actually articulate this plan and move forward. But again, the boss is finally getting a good aquatic themed one. It's just amazing as he opens up his chest, kind of like gills, to attack you, and opens up his weak point. It is just so amazing, and that tiny sliver of moon up there kind of emulates the Hangman battle in the original House of the Dead, a small visual tie from one game to the other, and I absolutely just love that they do that in these games. But you'll see here again, Goldman's going to appear in his office, and you're going to get little intercuts of him throughout the entire game until you finally meet him in the end. And he's the head of one of the most eminent financial groups and an expert on genome theory. But here's the thing. When they made this game, he was the head of it, but you're going to find out in a later entry, Scarlet Dawn, that there's actually somebody else behind the scenes pulling all the strings. Now, if you haven't played Scarlet Dawn yet, I'm not going to tell you in this video who that is, but that is Goldman and Curian, and there's a third person in that photograph. He was behind the series of terror incidents. And it's very fun that they were able to backwork the story for Scarlet Dawn into the events of House of the Dead 2. And once you watch all the videos, that will make a ton more sense. Like I said, sometimes though, Sega's just weird. That guy was calling out for help, you help him, and his voice changes completely. So just for fun, go ahead and listen to what it sounds like, and I'll come back in like 20 seconds and we'll keep going with the video, but it is pretty damn funny.
Thank you. I'll open the water gate for you.
And yeah, you just heard that right. It went from a small child asking for help to a caricature of an older Hispanic man opening that water gate. I don't know why they would do that. Sega was a great developer. Maybe that was just a sample mistake, or maybe they thought they could get away with reusing it and we wouldn't notice. But I heard that the first time I played the game, and I'll never unhear it. And now that I've showed it to you, you'll probably never unhear it either. But you'll see here Amy gets a call, and Amy as a character is just someone who's in the House of the Dead too. She's never going to get referenced again. It's just a throwaway character, so her entire story in this is just in support of James, as is Harry's. It's just one of those things where it doesn't really add up to anything. They're just there supporting cast. But we are heading towards Goldman, and we are going through these sewers, and again, just the zombie designs, those emaciated skeletal bodies that have clearly been wasting away from decay, look incredible, and all of these hooded fat men as the guts just pop off, as all that corpulence chunks apart. It's just such a look. But I still do love the voice acting in this game. You can tell they tried, but this guy says, "My friends went inside, but they're not back yet. I told them not to go. Let's see what happened to his friend." Well, he's trying to escape, and now he's gone, because we are on to our next boss fight, and this one is particularly fun, although I would say it is quite challenging, and if you ever play the Typing of the Dead, this might be the hardest battle in the game, and that is Tower. Kinda like a Hydra, except some extra heads here, but it is just another great design, and I can't get over how good the boss designs are basically throughout this entire series. And it is a nice two-stage battle. Once you finally knock out his companion heads there, not a sentence you get to say very often, this lead dragon is going to go through the sand and try to attack you. Timing is crucial. You need to be really quick on where you're aiming, because as he powers up, his head's going to be wiggling left, right, and backing up, and it's just going to try to confuse you. Definitely a system just to make the game a little bit harder to get an extra quarter off you in arcades, but it is a challenging boss fight. But once you get used to it, it's not too hard to knock him out, and you'll see that's one more boss down. But we still got plenty of game coming, so let's move right into it. But you see, get a little bit more of a cutscene here, and Amy is telling James to come quickly because something terrible has happened. So it kind of predicates just what's moving forward. But man, that old cell phone, I had a cell phone that looked just like that. Not trying to betray my age, but it's just a thing that I always think about when I play the game. But you'll see here we're moving into the 4th chapter, Despair, and I do love the chapter names of this game as well. But now we're further on into the city in some catacombs here, and again, it's just such a great art design piece. All the sets in this game, all the environments, they look old, they look weathered, those pipes look like that concrete is chipping, and everything has kind of like a slight sheen of mold on it. This feels old, and I always think about that when I play this game, so they were trying to make this an old European city, and the art designers did a great job of doing just that. It feels like it has been there forever, just like it feels like I've been playing this game forever. They go together so elegantly. But I can't talk about the voice acting in this game if I don't give you a really good chunk of Goldman's voice actor, because it might be like the brass ring of bad voice acting. We're talking Resident Evil 1 levels of bad, but just like everyone fondly remembers those voice lines, I fondly remember these. So go ahead and listen, and I'll come back and give you some more history.
People of the AMS, I am Goldman. I don't care if you people try to get in my way or not. In time you'll find out who's right. This is a present from me to you.
Look at your right.
Amy! Harry!
Well, friends, I look forward to meeting you people again.
Not everyone knows everything about my life, but as a profession, I'm a film director and cinematographer, and I've directed some relatively large things, and I do not know what direction that voice actor was getting for whoever was in the room, but I don't think there was anybody in the room giving them any direction, although even if you were just making it up, I think you could have done better than that. But honestly, it is classic. I love hearing Goldman's voice, even if it is absolute garbage, because it's what I remember as a kid. And there is something nostalgic about how bad the voice acting in this game actually is. It might be the worst in the series, but I debate that between this and Scarlet Dawn. The only reason Scarlet Dawn might be worse is because it's a lot further in the future development-wise, and the voice acting is terrible, and the writing is even worse than this game. Doesn't seem like an accident, seems like something kind of went wrong. But you'll see here, there's a car parked in the city square and we need to move on because we're trying to get to Goldman's Tower. And this is where the connection to House of the Dead 4 gets really deep and really interesting. There are some bits of lore that we've already talked about as to how those two games connect and how this game kind of informs the series moving forward. But this level here is where we actually see tangible connections graphically and level-wise to that game. But first, we have to get into the car. That's where I'm going to transition and talk about the next thing. And I love these beret soldiers. Not sure why they have berets, but it totally works for them. Kind of like a French Foreign Legion zombie look. And these dudes here that look like they just basically crap their own esophagus out of their chest. Maybe it's their heart, maybe it's their spleen, maybe it's their stomach, but I'm going to go with esophagus because it kind of just looks like that's what it would be. And I don't know anything about anatomy, so esophagus it is. But you'll see here as we get into the car, in House of the Dead 4, we also get into the car with James and Kate. James in the car here is going to the same building as James was in House of the Dead 2. We are literally retreading territory that happened in a previous game. We're just doing it in a way more modern look. And I love that as we come over this bridge here and drive down it, we can literally transition cut right to the same spot. It doesn't even make my work as an editor hard. It is laid up that easy, but it's such a fun connection. And that's why I think this video, as far as the timeline is concerned, is going to end up being so important. You get some refights, don't want to deal with that. You saw him, I killed him, and we can move on with the car here. Luckily that crater didn't break the sidewalk, or else we would be stuck, and maybe Goldman would have won. Maybe he should have bombed his own bridge out, that way we couldn't have gotten to him. But of course the villain never really has any good ideas. And you'll see here as we get to Goldman's Tower, there's going to be an explosion and someone very, very familiar is going to come out. And that is because, of course, the best boss, so far at least, ever a final boss, Magician, is back. You're getting a Magician refight and he looks even weirder and stranger than he did the first time you saw him. But I just love that they brought him back because it's such an iconic boss and maybe my favorite boss in the entire House of the Dead franchise. But they definitely made him easier than the original game because in the original House of the Dead, I can struggle with a Magician sometimes, but here I find him to be much easier even though the movement speed is about the same, if not slightly faster. I just think his hitbox might be slightly increased, but whatever happened, getting a refight with a Magician is always going to be a good time, and I'm never going to complain about that. And you will see more Magician later on as well, I just don't want to tell you where or tell you how. But because this game does tie into the events of House of the Dead 4, we'll also tie this game into House of the Dead 4 Special, which does have its own storyline, not as large as 2 or 4, but there are little breadcrumbs in there that will help us connect everything. But as we enter Goldman's Tower, this is another area in which we're going to be retreading in House of the Dead 4, and I'll show you more of that once we get to this video. But I just love how the storyline completely folds back into the same location. If I was at Sega, this would have been a fun thing to do. It would have been on the top of my head too, to try to retread the same environments to show a bit of the same story. And I do want you to hear some of the story because it is quite interesting, well, as far as Sega can make a story interesting, which is to say, there's a lot of reading between the lines. But go ahead and listen to this 15-second clip of James, and I'll come back and close out the video.
James, are you sure you're all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just remembered something. It all started back in the year 2000. Let's go. We must finish this once and for all.
And that's because in House of the Dead 4, James is back to finish everything once and for all, although that's not quite true whatsoever because the events of House of the Dead 3 will occur after the events of House of the Dead 4 in Special. And I will say this tower here is not an easy time whatsoever. Be prepared to dump some virtual quarters in. But as we get up to Goldman's office, of course we're going to have the confrontation with the big bad enemy. That's always what's going to happen here. And it's interesting because the House of the Dead 4 is going to replay this scene, but they're going to change the dialogue as to what's actually happening, so they can basically retcon some of the storyline to better allow for it to fit into the House of the Dead 4 story. But you'll see here the original sin that man is responsible for is to protect the life cycle. This is what he's doing, and there is a prototype for this game. I did capture some footage, but I didn't end up including it in the edit. But the original title of House of the Dead 2 was House of the Dead 2 Original Sin. They just took that and put it as the last level. But he's going to introduce us to the Emperor. But first, we have to see what he's doing in House of the Dead 4. And you're going to see him giving his same soliloquy, basically telling the same story in a slightly different way so that they can incorporate some of the character designs for the bosses into House of the Dead 4 proper. Because this James here is the same James from House of the Dead 2. But moving on to the boss fight, I just don't like this one. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I love so many of the bosses in the House of the Dead franchise, but there's something about this boss fight that I just never loved. I feel like I'm just fighting Chaos from Sonic Adventure, and you can even see that glowing heart in his center. Kind of feels like the Chaos Emeralds in Chaos, and that's just the thing. The Emperor, I've never liked his design. It's like a mix between Chaos and Knights from Nights into Dreams, and that's just fine. And that drawing there, I'm not sure what that big thing poking out of the front of him is, if you know what I mean. But I get big, huge Phantasm vibes here with all those glowing orbs coming at her head. All you need is the tall man to make it a perfect match. But that's the thing. Even though I've done an entire retrospective on the House of the Dead, and even though I absolutely love every single game in this series, I'm not going to blow smoke up your you-know-what and say every single part of it is perfect. There's just something about floating balls that I don't love. Take that as you will. It's a fine boss fight, but it never really does too much for me, and I will say in spots it feels like you're hitting that inner heart, but nothing is happening. I can't believe not a single one of those shots registered there, and then finally I get that kill on the boss. It's fine, it's good, maybe you love it, maybe you don't. Leave me a comment down below. But of course the final boss is going to explode in some spectacular fashion, because pretty much every final boss in the House of the Dead finds a new and exciting way to blow up on screen. And you will see here, this time Goldman's still alive. It's not like Curian where the magician killed him, but he just says, "Friends, it's not over yet." And even James asks him, "Is that all you have to say?" But he does tell us in time a successor will come. We know Dr. Curian if you watch the first episode. We know Goldman, and he takes this awesome Nakatomi Tower style dive off the edge, except he wasn't pushed. But you'll see here that James says it's finally over. We know that's not true because of the House of the Dead 4 events, but he doesn't care if a successor comes or not. He will go on fighting. And that's the fun thing. The games are able to work back with this information because the successor does in fact come. I'm not going to tell you what his name is in case you haven't played Scarlet Dawn. I will let you get to the Scarlet Dawn video until you find out more. But in fact they set it up because the successor to Curian and Goldman does exist, and you'll be seeing him soon. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye bye.